Where do I even start? Episode 1 of Vision of the East starts off with a monologue given to us by a girl who we later find out is Saki, talking about how the world needed a king and how his sacrifice saved millions of lives. We start off by seeing Saki visiting Washington, D.C., where she gets into a little bit of trouble with the police for attempting to throw a coin at the White House fountain. But luckily, a strange, nude Japanese boy named Akira is there to distract the police while she gets away. Eventually, they meet up again, and Saki gives the strange boy her coat, so he won't be nude anymore. And I know this is a little bit of spoilers for, for the rest of the video, but it is never mentioned or brought up again why he was naked in Washington, D.C. Why he had to be naked, absolutely no idea. But it is never mentioned again, and nudity is a very common trope in this show. But it is never mentioned why, in the first episode, Akira was naked. All Akira had was his cell phone and a gun. He returns home only to find his apartment filled with guns and fake passports. He calls a special number on his phone, directing him to an assistant called Julisse. She explains that his memory has been wiped, and she is there to help him in any way possible. Akira, after seeing all these weapons around him, makes him think that maybe he's not such a good person after all. Saki decides to find Akira again after she left her passport and her coat. Saki and Akira decide to go back to Japan together, only to find out that Tokyo had just been hit with a missile attack. In episode 2, Akira and Saki arrive at Tokyo, where Akira confesses to Saki that he has no previous memories before they met in DC. Saki decides to help Akira track down where he lives by using the address in his passport. Later in the episode, Julisse, the assistant from before, tells Akira that it is his responsibility to spend 8.2 billion yen, which the phone has as a balance. We later find out why Akira has this much money, but for now, we truly do not know. But meanwhile, Akira is being tracked by a detective. Akira decides to strike up a conversation with the detective because they have similar cell phones. The detective's name is Kondo? Yeah, listen, I don't know. It's a weird Japanese name. It may not be a weird Japanese name. I just can't read. But either way, the detective questions Akira about being a Selasau, but Akira does not know what this means, and he still can't remember anything. So they decide to go their separate ways. For now. Akira and Saki arrive at the address that was written in Akira's passport. It turns out it's an abandoned shopping mall. They look around the mall and they decide to watch a movie together at the cinema, which is built into the mall. But unannounced to them, the detective has been following Akira this whole time. The detective finds him in the projector room and beats him up to take his cell phone, and then later leaves. The detective later gets a cell phone call from Julisse, telling him that the cell phones only work with fingerprint authorization, and that all his efforts to steal the phone from Akira are in vain. Immediately after, he gets another call from Akira saying that he has his badge number and they should meet up. While the detective is waiting at the agreed location, he is stabbed by his wife. We find out that he was cheating on his wife and somehow the information got leaked to her. Only moments after does Akira arrive. The detective, with his dying breath, explains that Akira is trapped in a death game. He explains that besides them, there are 10 other Selasau with 10 billion yen each, and if their money count drops to 0, they will be killed. And the purpose of why they have this much money in the first place is to restore Japan back to its former glory. Akira follows the detective's advice, which was to track down the other Selasau, which he does. Akira had managed to track down number 5, an influential brain surgeon called Hira. At first, Hira suspects Akira of being the supporter, a special Selasau that is tasked with killing others or punishing them if they break any of the game's rules. Hira was certain that Akira was there to kill him because he had used up all of his money, building facilities that will take care of Japan's aging population. That's how the doctor wanted to help better Japan. The doctor later explains to Akira that the game is run by Mr. Outside, an individual who had given 12 people 10 billion yen to become the new messiah of Japan. After Akira leaves the hospital, Hira is murdered by the supporter since he had run out of money. As Akira contemplates the power he has as a Celestial, he is confronted by a stranger, clearly someone he knew before his memories were wiped. It is implied that this stranger is one of the missing Neets. This would be a good time to mention the missing Neets. Okay, so a couple of months before the current events that are taking place now, 20,000 Neets, also known as Redditors, got displaced from Japan, and now they're missing, and no one can find them. Ha ha ha. Yeah, so basically the Redditor thanks Akira for reintroducing him back into society, but as this is happening, Akira realizes that he completely forgot about Saki, so he asks Julius to track her down. As he does this, Celestial number 1 and number 11 take notice of Akira's activities. They can do this because each time you ask Julius for a request, the phone logs the activities. Saki, meanwhile, prepares for a job interview, but she is rudely turned down. As she walks out the building, she finds Akira waiting outside for her, and she goes with him while she's venting about how adults are not caring about the younger generation. Okay, and I'm completely going off script here, but this is one of the best jokes ever. So Julius can essentially do anything you ask her to, and Akira accidentally made a political figure say uncle on live television, and that resulted in his approval rating going up by like 12%. And that joke was really funny, and if you do watch the series, I kind of fucking spoiled the joke, but it is so fucking hilarious that he accidentally made a political figure say uncle and his approval rating went up by 12%. That's fucking hilarious. Nothing to do with the main story though. Osuji, one of Saki's close friends, sees Saki riding off with Akira, and he is heartbroken. This would also be a good time to explain that Saki, along with her friends, have been working on a program called Eden. This is a program that tracks information and displays it immediately on a cell phone. Saki and her friends want to turn this into a lucrative business to better the world, but they don't have the financial means to get there. But that all might change really soon. Osuji, seeing that Saki rode off with Akira, decides to get drunk at a restaurant. But as this is happening, number 11 comes across him with a suspicious-looking smile. Saki returns to her friends, the ones helping make Eden of the East, and she tells them about Akira. They are very interested in him but are still very suspicious of him, so they decide to visit. Akira warmly greets them and is informed that they have a very special cause, that being Eden of the East. Saki and her friends have developed a revolutionary image recognition program, but they have problems. Akira has offered to help Eden of the East reach their goal. In exchange, he wants them to help him as his duty as a Celestial. Meanwhile, another person from the group called Hirasawa suspects that Osuji may have been kidnapped by the Johnny Hunter, a serial killer with a reputation of killing 20,000 victims according to an online story circulating the internet. The Eden of the East members begin receiving images from Osuji. Akira uses his phone to find him. Julius is able to pinpoint his location in a hotel, where he was taken after being kidnapped by the Johnny Hunter, which turns out to be Celestial number 11. Akira goes into the hotel to try to save Osuji. Celestial number 11 explains to Akira that she only cuts off men's Johnnies and murders them as an act of revenge. Number 11 has inflicted damage to Akira, and he passes out, but not before offering true love to number 11, which she has not received from any man before. Saki followed Akira to the hotel and finds number 11 tending to Akira's wounds. She reveals that the prisoner that she had kept was not Osuji, but in fact a criminal, and she does not know how they could have confused the two. She then uses an illusion to escape. Akira wakes up to Saki tending his wounds and learns that number 11 has disappeared. Osuji returns to the Eden of the East Club, and he tells him that he was invited to a drinking party and his bag was stolen that night, which caused the misunderstanding. He showed his displeasure about Saki and Akira leaving together that night. Akira asked the Eden group if they could repair his Celestial cell phone that he had gotten from the detective before he died. They suggest visiting a Redditor friend called Panties, He's a very smart individual, and he's a very good hacker. While this is going on, Osuji scans Akira into the Eden program, which pulls up all his previous aliases and names. This suggests that Akira might be a criminal, and Osuji tries to warn the rest of the group. Panties manages to recover all the Selasal records by fixing the detective's phone. Akira finds out that the Selasals were responsible for the Careless Monday attacks, which were the original attacks on Japan. Akira was also apparently responsible for the 20,000 missing Redditors. Akira makes Panties promise not to tell Saki what he discovered there that day, but when Saki asks Panties about what exactly happened, he tells Saki that she's better off not knowing. Meanwhile, Manino, number 1, and Yuki, number 10, followed Akira to Panties. Panties discovers that number 10 was responsible for the missile attacks and that Akira arranged evacuations to protect the people. Back in Tokyo, the Eden team meets with Osuji at Akira's theater, where they discover where the 20,000 Redditors were being held, and writing on the wall saying that they will destroy Akira. Saki and her friend Mekin board the train home, but Akira doesn't. Akira is confronted by number 1, who offers to reveal the truth about the game and himself. Just then, Akira receives a call from Saki, where she reveals that she's overheard conversations that Akira has had with other people due to him not hanging up the phone. Akira does not mind this, and in fact tells Saki to stay on the line and listen into the conversations to inform the Eden group about what's really going on. Meanwhile, the Eden group receives large amounts of data from Panties. Akira and number 1 talk about the missing Redditors, and number 1 explains who he believes Mr. Outside to be. He thinks that Mr. Outside is a man named Ado Seiso. He is the president of the ATO company and is a great political figure who once helped Japan. Number 1 also explains that Mr. Outside is probably dead because he suffered from a terminal illness. Although he is dead, the game still continues on because of the supporter, the Selasal that will kill anyone who doesn't follow the game's rules. As Akira and number 1 arrive at the ATO institution facility, number 1 explains that he will become the new Mr. Outside and he will take charge of Julius. Meanwhile, the Eden group finds out that the cell phone data is actually the logs from the Selasals and all the activities that they've been up to. But just as they're about to uncover the data, they look outside to see a ship full of naked people who they think is the 20,000 missing Redditors. Number 1, along with 2 other Selasal, plan to launch attacks on Japan again. Number 1 also explains why Akira erased his own memory. It is because he was betrayed by the people he attempted to help. Akira was the one who evacuated all the people from the first attack, but after that, the people who helped with the evacuation wanted more information about the attacks. They grew restless and started stealing and revolting against Akira. After finding out the truth, Akira is upset and is now on a moving train. Saki also feels terrible. She's been listening in the whole time and she wished she would have treated Akira better. This leaves number 1 about to launch an attack on Japan. Saki and her friend make it back to Akira's house, which has already been invaded by the 20,000 Redditors. Saki explains to the Eden group that Akira had recruited the 20,000 Redditors to help evacuate citizens before the first attack, disguised as government personnel. However, in order to cover up his involvement, Akira took full responsibility of the first attack and shipped the 20,000 Redditors off to Dubai for 3 months to keep them out of public eye. Out of guilt and despair for what had happened, Akira erased his own memory. Finally, after analyzing the data that they got from Panties, the Eden group discovers that there are missiles being targeted all over Japan, including where they're at. Akira then contacts all the Redditors and tells them that he has arranged a bigger attack, bigger than the first time, and instructs them to figure out the best ways to intercept the missiles and upload their plans to the Eden program. And they do just that. Using the collective knowledge of the Redditors, Julius organizes a network of F-15 jet fighters and missile launchers to intercept the other incoming missiles. What unfolds next can only be described as some of the best minutes of animated history. Everyone, including the rest of the Selasal which launched the attack, watches the F-15 fighters shoot down every single missile raining from above. Each one is close to hitting the ground, but just in time they're shot down. If a single missile hits the ground, thousands of people will die, and with tensions high, Akira stands above the rest and watches as his efforts are shown in full glory.
Knowing that this event will be much harder to cover up than the first attack, Akira instructs Julius to take all his remaining money to make him the king of Japan.
He knows that smarter and more capable people are out there that could do a better job at being king, but none of them are willing to step up and bear the responsibility of leadership, so it is up to him to take it. In order to become king, Akira uses the last of his money and slips his phone into Saki's pocket. The series ends with Saki contemplating about what will happen to Japan now that Akira is king. Akira has saved Japan. Now finally, Eden of the East is over. The series left a whole lot of unanswered questions, but overall I really enjoyed it. And there's 2 movies, which I have not watched, but maybe I'll review later. I don't know. But for now, I'm just a side character. And thanks for watching.